Imagine carrying the full logistical weight of a modern army, not with trucks or horses, but on your back, through swamps that swallow men to the knee, through walls of razor-edged elephant grass, through equatorial downpours that turn footpaths into rivers overnight. Now just imagine doing all of it barefoot. This is East Africa from 1914 to 1918, and the men who made it possible were never given a single line in most history books. They were called the African Carrier Corps, the Carrier Corps, and over 400,000 were conscripted or recruited to keep British forces moving through terrain that destroyed every other form of transport. Wheeled vehicles drowned. Draft animals died from sepsis-borne disease. Only men could move through what East Africa threw at those armies, and it was African men, largely unshod and undersupplied, who bore that weight. Reading the Mud Barefoot adaptation as Fieldcraft. For the majority of the Carrier Corps, men drawn from rural communities across Kenya, Uganda and Tanganyika, barefoot movement was not deprivation. It was, really, a lifelong practice. A bare foot spreads weight across a wider surface in soft mud, resisting the suctioning effect that locks a booted foot in place and demands enormous energy to free. The toes and sole read ground texture constantly, adjusting balance before the foot has fully committed. Carriers had developed calluses of near leather thickness and a kinesthetic sense of terrain that no military training could replicate. They also carried indigenous knowledge for managing foot health. Plant-based antiseptics from bruised leaves, communal inspection routines at camp, and the discipline of drying feet at every fire before infections could take hold. Moving through the impossible trail-breaking and corduroy roads. The East African bush in the rainy season is actively hostile to movement. Dense woodland, papyrus swamps, and long grass savanna could all appear within a single day's march. Carriers served as trailblazers, using pangars to cut passage through undergrowth and harvest raw materials for corduroy roads, log surfaces laid directly across impassable mud to create temporary causeways. No manufactured components, no supply chain, just knowledge, tools and labour the Carrier Corps provided entirely from its own resources. The soundscape of these marches was extraordinary. The slap of bare feet on wet wood, pangas cracking through brush, the sucking groan of mud reclaiming each step, and beneath it all, bird calls that the carriers, unlike their British officers, could read for what they revealed about the terrain ahead. Shelter, fire, and the art of staying alive overnight. When the column stopped, survival shifted to shelter. Lean-to structures of elephant grass and banana leaves could be raised in under an hour by experienced hands, thatched in overlapping downward-facing courses to channel rain off rather than absorb it. Elevated sleeping platforms kept bodies off wet ground and away from insects and reptiles. Fire discipline in saturated conditions was equally critical. Dry heartwood from dead-standing timber served as the fire's core, with radiating starfire logs pushed inward as they burned. A self-managing fire that survived the night without collapsing inward and smothering. That fire was not comfort. It was, honestly, the line between a column that rose capable and one that rose fevered and broken. Food, water, and the slow violence of scarcity. The British supply chain for the Carrier Corps was, honestly, a catastrophe of neglect. Rations were irregularly delivered and, well, nutritionally inadequate for men performing extreme labour in tropical heat. When posho, the maize flour staple, ran short, men foraged as they marched. Those from agricultural communities, they recognized edible tubers, wild greens, and bee colonies whose honey provided fast energy to depleted bodies. They also practiced what might be called cognitive fieldcraft, reasoning from known plant families to unfamiliar species, a survival skill that, interestingly, appears in no military manual, but almost certainly saved lives. Water sourcing followed a similar kind of logic. The digging of seep wells beside riverbeds, shallow pits that allowed water to filter clear through sand, was standard community knowledge, and far safer than any surface source in the field. The morale, camouflage, and the sound of a column breaking. Moving through contested terrain, carriers instinctively broke silhouette against the skyline and halted when scouts were sighted. Not trained doctrine, but generations of bush sense applied to war. Morale travelled through communal singing rhythmic call-and-response cadence that regulated breathing, synchronized footfall, and really distributed exhaustion across the group, rather than crushing each man individually. When the singing stopped, the headman, senior community figures embedded in the Corps' structure, knew to be alarmed. Silence was the sound of a unit approaching its limit. These headmen were the real morale officers, arbitrating disputes, allocating scarce food, and maintaining the cultural continuity that kept men from walking into the bush and not returning, which, many did, and which was sometimes the most rational survival decision available to them. The cost and what it teaches. Between 46,000 and 95,000 carriers died. The uncertainty itself a testament to how little the British military cared to count them. They died not from enemy fire, but from dysentery, malaria, pneumonia, and the systemic collapse of bodies pushed past their limits on inadequate food. Their survival was not a triumph, it was mass attrition, and the men who lived were those whose indigenous knowledge, physical constitution, and collective support held long enough to outlast a system indifferent to their welfare. What they leave behind, for the survivalist, the bushcraft learner, the preparedness community, is a body of proof. Embodied terrain knowledge outlasts equipment. Community outlasts individual will. The Kariakor neighborhood in Nairobi still carries their name. Their fieldcraft was real. Their endurance was extraordinary. And the least we can do is learn from what they knew. If this episode brought history to life for you, subscribe to Fieldcraft Chronicles and share this video with every history lover, bushcraft learner, and self-reliance practitioner you know. These stories deserve to be told, and your share makes sure they reach the people who need to hear them. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode, and join a community that believes the past has everything to teach us about staying alive, staying capable, and staying human in a world that never stops testing both.